All right, go for it.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. And I would like to say happy Halloween. I hope everyone's got some Halloween candy to get you through the day. My name is Duncan McIntyre. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at Highland Electric Fleets, and was excited to be able to personally welcome everyone to another Highland webinar. I'm excited about the discussion today. It's focused on a topic that is near and dear to me, one that I love. It's debunking the myths of electric school buses. We hear chatter from all across the market, on a daily basis about reasons why people love electric school buses and reasons why people are concerned. And some of the concerns are genuine, but many of them are really myths. And being able to get to the heart of the matter with information, analysis, but most importantly from real people who are out there every day navigating the complexities of keeping fleets like this on the road. So, to the panel we have today, thank you so much for your time. I'm really excited. This is intended to be authentic. Put questions into Q&A. We'll get to as many of them as we can, and very much intended to be a debate. Present some facts, and then let the people out there who have volunteered their time today to debate their opinions on them. So again, thank you. I get introduce a couple people here. I'll start with our guide and moderator for the discussion is our Western Regional Manager on the Market Development team here at Highland, Jane Israel. So Jane, thank you so much. Jane's a clean energy and climate change expert who currently supports our market development team by educating school districts on the best ways to electrify their fleets. This includes a variety of activities, includes community organizing, mass market education. Jane does a ton of policy advocacy at the state and local levels, and also does sort of major account support. And she engages with utilities, with regulators, with legislators, all around existing and potential programs designed to support school bus electrification. So thank you, Jane, for organizing this discussion today. Next, I'm happy to introduce our three panelists. First being Brian Cressey, president of WC Cressey of Maine. Brian's responsible for all areas of the dealership, including sales, parts, service, leasing, financing. Brian's focus has been really to create a full-service dealership that offers more than just bus sales to their customers. He sees the role of training, tailored financing, and remarketing and consulting as critical to the entire success of their customers' experience. Brian served as the Northeast representative for the Thomas Dealer Advisory Council from 2011 through 2019, and from 2013 to 19, he chaired the Thomas Customer Support Association work group that advises on all parts, service, and warranty matters, and today still serves as co-chair of the group. Brian has also worked as a controller and a CFO for a national parking and garage management company in the Boston area. He's worked as a CPA at a regional accounting firm, and performed a full complement of services, closely held businesses. Brian and his wife purchased a school bus contracting company in New Hampshire, managed it all the way through COVID, and recently sold that company to a national operator. So Brian has certainly seen the school bus industry from all angles, and been at the heart of what it looks like to run a really successful dealership. So thank you, Brian, very much. Our second panelist is John Gonzales, a senior engineer for advanced vehicle deployment at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. John, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today. He's a senior engineer for technical assistance and deployment of alternative fuel vehicles for the Clean Cities Coalition Network, a position that's housed at NREL. He works with the National Gas Vehicle Technology Forum, researches gaseous fuel storage equipment. In addition to his natural gas expertise, he spends a considerable time providing technical assistance on a variety of propane and electric vehicle projects. Prior to NREL, he worked for the National Fuels Corporation, promoting natural gas as an alternative fuel for automobiles, trucks, and buses. And as a fleet manager for Adams 12, five-star school district in suburban Denver, Colorado area, which is a big district of over 42,000 students, by the way. He was responsible for their 140 school bus fleet and another 120 support vehicles, and overseeing vehicle maintenance and custodial equipment as well. John's hands-on experience helps him very much to relate to the concerns of all fleet managers who are evaluating, adopting, and considering a variety of alternative fuels and advanced technologies. So again, John, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. And our third panelist, you may have seen recently in an episode of Bus Talk, if you've seen some of the recent episodes, but happy to introduce Sean McKenzie, who's the transportation coordinator at the South Burlington School District in Vermont. Sean is in his 10th year at South Burlington School District. He supports all the critical functions and developments that help meet the transit needs of the students at the school district. He's a transportation expert. He brings 37 years of combined professional experience in commercial vehicle operations and has a fleet of electric buses in his fleet up there that I'm sure are out running on this Halloween morning. So again, thank you to all three panelists. Thank you, Jane, for organizing. And I'm looking forward to the debate. And again, thanks everyone for attending. So Jane, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Duncan. And thanks for the introductions. And I think we're well set for a very interesting discussion here today. Just wanted to thank you all and echo Duncan's thanking you all for joining here today. Special thanks to our panelists who are joining us for this special Halloween webinar. Hopefully it won't be too spooky. I think we'll get some really good answers addressed throughout the discussion. In just hearing all of your bios and getting a chance to speak with you all prior to this panel, I'm so excited and feel very fortunate that we're getting the opportunity to have such a great panel joining us here today. Really, truly experts who will hopefully be able to help us debunk some myths and help answer some of our audience questions. As we mentioned, we're really hoping for this to be more of a discussion here today. So would once again like to encourage all audience members to submit questions throughout the discussion. We're going to be addressing your questions sort of throughout. So please keep them coming. So now as I turn to the panelists virtually, I'll start with a question here that I would like you all to answer. With the recent increase in grant and incentive funding at the state and federal level in support of electric school buses, we've seen a growing interest amongst school districts sort of across the country that are looking to, take advantage of this funding and really start electrifying their fleets, potentially in larger scales, but also, at pilot levels. So as these districts are starting to electrify, what recommendations would you have for them in getting started in this process? And Sean, maybe I'll turn the question to you first as our resident transportation coordinator. Would you like to take the first stab at that?
I think really number one is, before you consider electric buses, is to make sure your infrastructure is there. Make sure you can meet the power needs of the buses. Because if you don't have if you can't meet the needs of the charging, then you're not going to be successful.
Absolutely. John, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, Sean, I agree. I think that's critical without a doubt. I also say look at the routes. What do the routes look like? What are your best routes? Because some routes work better than others. So kind of start looking at that, formulate a plan on looking at those routes. What would serve the best purpose for the electric bus, where it meets its needs, where it's not outside of its range envelope. And then once you know that, then you can understand a little bit more about working with your utility to figure out those charging needs to make sure that you can provide the energy that you need to get these buses to do the work they need to do on a daily basis.
Sounds like I'm hearing planning in both of those responses. Brian, anything to add to that?
Yeah, for me, it's all about the money. I mean, I'm a finance guy, and there's so many incentives on these things right now to fund them, both the buses and the infrastructure. And it's the classic case right now with schools. The COVID era money is gone. Budgets are hard, and to the extent you can get rebates or grant funding for these things, and there's a whole laundry list of them. It's always better to get somebody else to pay for the stuff you need.
Makes good sense. John, I've got a specific question for you. NREL's been actively involved in the development of tools for districts around all types of alternative fuels, but certainly focused on electric as well. Can you speak a little bit more about the resources that are available to districts from the Joint Office and for NREL and sort of helping potentially, harkening back to the previous question on the planning front, are there tools that districts can take advantage of?
Yeah, the best place I would direct folks is to the Alternative Fuels Data Center. That's really our database as far as all different types of tools, looking at all the different fuels when it's all said and done. I mean, we're a fuel neutral program, but we do have an electric specific page for folks to go to that has tools. Also, it will direct them to the Joint Office on the different tools that we have worked with the Joint Office on. So really, the Alternative Fuels Data Center that is held within NREL is really the best place for them to go to.
Awesome. Certainly, I'm sure can provide the links to that in future info sessions. I have kind of $1 million question from you all, or for you all, that was submitted by an audience member of ours. So bear with me. I'm sure this is a question we're all interested in hearing your answers to. But how do we accelerate from sort of our ICE vehicles to EVs in the school bus arena? Folks ask the question, we're running out of time, I presume, meaning climate time, emissions reduction time. How do you all think we can start to accelerate this process? Brian, do you want to take this one first?
I don't know if I'm the right guy to answer it, but I'll tell you what I think. And maybe the debate starts here. Is I've been going to school board meetings forever, selling new buses, and I've never seen our industry politicized, and it is right now. Mm-hmm. That's really hard. So it's when we go into a board meeting, a third of the people think this is the best idea they've ever heard. A third of the people think it's the worst idea they've ever heard. And you just kind of talk to the group in the middle and see how it goes. But as a country, as a lot of things, it's hard to push this if the board members and the districts and the taxpayers aren't willing. And the only way that people change their mindsets about this and any one of the other issues is by data. So you put the finance data together, you do some training, you do projections, you do as tangible calculations as you can come up with, and that's typically how you swing that group. And we've seen some sort of circumstances up here where that's actually happened, but you don't do it in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So education, it sounds like education is key, and having real data to back up what you're saying is also critical.
Yep.
Sean or John, do either of you want to take a stab at at that question? I know it's a big one that we get often.
I think the funding that's available, and Brian brought this up, that there needs to be a way to make this economical, and the funding that's available that's out there is helping with that. It's a jumpstart. That's really what this is designed for, is a jumpstart to get school districts that might not have had the opportunity to try a new technology, and that's what this is, and get them used to it, get it in their fleet, get an opportunity to bring, Sean brought that up as far as bringing power to the site. How do we do that? How do we get the charging to the site? And then how do we bring the vehicles in and then really implement them into the fleet? How do we get transportation on board through workforce development? How do we train them? How do we train the drivers? Because it's different. Is it challenging? No. But is it different? Yes. And this is a great opportunity that we have to bring a new technology into the fleet that, and like Brian said, is a hard one financially if you don't have the incentives right now, and it does give that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, John. Sean, any thoughts to add?
No, I mean, I agree with John and Brian, and like I said, the big thing is planning, is getting everybody involved, everybody on board, and really, ask the questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what we're hearing and what seems to be sort of a core thread throughout the discussion thus far is, education is key, planning is key, and really getting folks to understand this new technology. As John, I think you mentioned, it's not unsurmountable. It's not the most difficult, but it's new, and it requires, some education. So certainly something to keep in mind for those listening on the line, certainly. Sean, you just gave me a softball into the next question I was hoping to ask you, which is, can you describe your experience a little bit more on sort of the day-to-day management of electric school buses versus your more traditional diesel, potentially speaking to charge management and other sort of components of your day that have been a little bit different when compared to your other traditional ICE vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're pretty similar. And I know one thing that we did here is we adopted both through GPS and Highland has a dashboard, and to have a dashboard set up on a computer, and I have a separate monitor in my office that monitors both the electric buses and the diesel buses. So I have pretty much hands-on knowledge of their, like with the electric buses, the state of charge, whether they're charging, and that's really the biggest thing is like you said, is to have the knowledge, and the really, like you said, the actual operation of the electric buses is different. It's a little challenging in the beginning, but with the proper training, it's it's pretty easy to get into. But as far as day to day, it's not it's not overwhelming. I think if you've got like I said, if you've got the tools to monitor, and you keep on top of it, you can be pretty successful. I mean, we only have four vehicles, so it's pretty easy to monitor them. I would assume that more would be a little more challenging, but like I said, I think with the proper equipment and guidance, then you can definitely be successful.
Oh, certainly having the sorts of charge management software that kind of helps you be able to understand what is going on with your buses in real time, I think can be infinitely helpful in sort of helping folks bridge that gap between technologies. Sean, you sort of alluded to this a couple of questions ago, but wanted to kind of bring it back. Or I think it actually was Brian. You mentioned this. But as I think we all know, and certainly the panelists on this call know probably intimately well and probably too well, school district decisions, are often community driven. They're often ultimately decided at the school board level. And I'm sure each of you has experienced firsthand at some point sort of the difficulty or potential benefits of going to the board and sort of speaking your case, getting school board members to be supportive and of any sort of transition within transportation, whether it be from diesel to CNG or from CNG to electric or what have you. But it's a process, certainly. I think we can all agree to navigate. What do you all, so this is kind of a two-parter. What do you all see as maybe the biggest challenge that needs to be addressed when going to a school board and sort of getting them on board with this electrification process? And what would you recommend to districts, that are just starting this process, that are trying to, perhaps they've just recently been awarded some EPA funding and they want to make sure that the board understands what it is that they're trying to do, or perhaps they're, trying to start that process and want to bring their board in from early stages. John, I think I'd like to have you answer this question first, since I know you've worn, as Duncan mentioned in your bio, many different hats in this space. Be interested to hear your perspectives on that.
I think it's critical to do your due diligence, understand, be able to, Sean and Brian both brought forward, you need to have the case to your board, to your management, really. If you're a fleet manager, director, bringing that to your next level, what is the case? How do we do this financially? How can we make this happen? How can we do this on our transportation site? How do we bring those vehicles in? Where do we have charging available, or how do we bring charging? What are those opportunities available to us? It's really getting all that knowledge put together beforehand before you bring it to them, because sometimes there's going to be that top-down pressure from the board saying, hey, we want to look at this. Be prepared to be able to answer those questions when they come to you. Start doing your due diligence, understand what that is, work with your suppliers, what's available from them. Folks like Brian, what do they have available in your area? What kind of training? How do they support those vehicles? Those are all going to be critical pieces for a fleet to really look at. And then I still kind of rooted on the transportation side, from make sure your technicians know what's going on. Make sure they're part of the process, because they can make a program work or not as well. Bring the drivers in, work with your driver trainers, make sure the drivers know, make sure they're bought in, because it is a little different. It's not harder, it's just different. Understanding how the gauge works as far as energy. It's different than a fuel gauge, right? We don't have 100 gallons of diesel on board anymore. Let's understand what those differences are, and just get the holistic approach of making sure transportation understands what it is, and then look at the best routes and choose those, and choose something that you can be successful with. Don't put it on a route that has middays that might go to a long activities. Put it on something that's going to be successful, bring it into the fleet, get the understanding, and then it can grow from there. It can go from there. Kind of like Sean starts out with 4. He says, I'm going to be looking at more, but he's looking at how holistically it's going to work to best put those in the fleet. I think that's a great approach.
That's great, John. And definitely, I think sometimes we often neglect to think about the broader community, right? That's representative of fleet electrification, right? It starts with drivers, starts with technicians. It starts with, the whole community. As I mentioned at the top of the question, and the education of each is so critical. So definitely very helpful advice. Brian, anything you'd like to add to this? I know you touched on a few points previously.
Yeah, the biggest thing that we speak of in those meetings is really and nobody defines it that well, but it's the concept of risk, right? And there's risks with what we're doing currently. There's risks with adopting this technology. There's risks that impact it that have nothing to do with the buses and more to do with the drivers and things like that. And someone that's in there every day like Sean, is looking at routing. They're looking at where their stops are. They're looking at what driver to put on the right route and what driver shouldn't be on that route or that trip and things like that. And this is my unpaid testimonial for Highland, because as we look at the financial risk and the longevity risk with some of these EV projects, they seem willing to bite off some of that or to manage that. And, in some of those really honest school board conversations where, it's just the superintendent and the business manager and me, that's what they're really worried about. They're saying, we do our budget 1 year at a time. Oh my gosh, I can't be committed or on the hook for something for 10 years or 8 years. And I can't look like I've made a poor decision in front of the people that are, that supervise me. So, it's really just about managing those risks. And, none of us know how this stuff's going to work out for 12, 15 years, but all we can do is make good decisions and look at places where, we do have a couple of years or more of history. Sean's been excellent. We've had other customers go to his place and ride around an electric bus on a freezing cold day to see if it actually worked. And actually that's led to some other projects, but, a lot of this has to do with risk, and a lot of it we're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, I think certainly the learning by doing is so critically important, and not recreating the wheel, right? I think there are good examples of projects that are currently deployed today that are running well, and I think there are districts who can certainly learn from that. Brian, to your point on Sean potentially, being the example, being a helpful example that can sort of help in real time districts sort of sort through what actually needs to be done and things that could have been done, perhaps differently the first time around if they had known. All of these things are super helpful, and so that open dialogue and education is just so critically important. Sean, you've now been mentioned several times throughout these responses. I would love to hear sort of your perspectives on that. How did it work for you all?
Yeah, I agree with them, and I think too, and Brian will tell you the same thing, that we kind of started, or we did start this out, kind of, I don't want to say blindly, but we didn't have a lot of information. There wasn't really a lot of electric buses in New England. So we had to, like you said, we had to do a lot of things. We kind of had to figure out a lot of things on our own. And, honestly, we had a lot of problems in the beginning, but we, along with Highland and Cressey's, we worked through them. And, I would encourage people to, to ask the questions, get all the information that you can. Even there's no dumb question. Ask the questions, get all the information. I know I made up a list of all the little, all the little tips and tricks that I call them, that that we had problems, issues, good things, bad things, everything. We took a lot of notes. So like I'm saying, leverage those people, get your questions answered. And the information is out there. It's still, I would say that this, the whole electric bus thing, I think, is still kind of in its infancy. And everybody's, learning on a daily basis. And like I said, we're taking notes, we're sharing them with everybody, and more than happy to take questions, anything, something that you've, some other company that's found that's happened. Let us know about it. So if it's something that comes up, we'll know how to address it. It's, I think stuff like this, we're helping each other out. We're trying to make a difference.
That's great.
Jane, I'm just going to jump in quickly. There's a note in the chat. Brian, I don't know if you can be closer to your microphone or turn your volume up a little bit. I think a few people were having a tough time hearing you clearly. And then I just had one other comment. I thought this particular question was well addressed by all three of you. And in taking some notes, it became clear to me that, you know, there's a little bit of a playbook here for how you go address a school board. And it's 5 things. It's have a business case, right? To tell it based on the numbers. What is it going to cost and what are the uncertainties? The second is have a physical, practical plan. You know, how does this work with our depot and our routes, and how does it build? How does it work? The third is who are the suppliers and the partners and the support, and where do those things plug in? The fourth is all about team and people. It's training. I heard training from all three of you, and candidly, we would agree. I think 5 years ago at Highland, we thought training was largely upfront, and having fleets in 17 states, we now believe training is actually ongoing, and it's again and again, and it's creating muscle memory around it. And then the fourth is identifying risk in a very honest way. Here are the risks. Here are the things we've seen go wrong. Here's how we're going to mitigate them, and here's what we should prepare for. And so, John, I know you outlined those at the beginning, and please tell me if I jotted any of them down wrong. But to me, that felt like a playbook that is consistent with what we see in successful implementations.
You know, Duncan, I think you're absolutely that's kind of the way we see it, and that's the way I see it. If I was a fleet manager still, that's how I would look at it. I do want to echo what Sean said is critical is the whole peer piece. Work with your peers. When I was a fleet manager in Colorado, we had a technicians committee that the fleet managers kind of got together. We got together every other month, and we talked about different issues that were going on, but it also brought forward kind of those challenges of what works, what doesn't, right? And it's a very unbiased. They're just telling you what works in their fleet, and I think that's where if you can rely on folks like Sean and others that are in your area, look at your peers. They are a great resource. They can give you some great feedback on what worked, what didn't, how to work with utility, how to work with your school board. How did they do that? I think those are all good things to understand, and working with a peer is tremendous.
Yeah, could not agree more. And perhaps in the interest of that, and just recognizing we're halfway through this, love to turn to some more audience questions. Hopefully we can get some of these questions answered in real time. Hopefully many TDs on the line that are interested in hearing more about this and learning from the expertise you all have. John, you just mentioned sort of utility engagement. This is something that we know is a sort of critical piece of the puzzle. It happens hopefully very early in the process, but then is, you know, throughout the sort of electrification piece, the utility is sort of critical to this. And it's a little bit different, right, from what a traditional, you know, transportation director would have to do, right? This is a new type of fueling. Kilowatt hours are not the same as sort of gallons. Require a little bit more nuance, also require, you know, some upfront installation times and timetables to ensure that you've got your depot energized at the time that you're getting your bus received. And so we have a question here from the audience. You know, our greatest concern is the power will not be available to our rural school district. How can schools navigate this change? And how are utilities able to support the transition? I ask you, John, as I know you've helped some districts in rural Colorado start to address this. Would love to hear your perspectives.
Well, Jane, like you said, you just work with them early and often and find out what is available. Sean brought that up. Do you have power available? I think you also looking, what are your charging needs? Can you utilize a level 2 type charger that isn't quite as demanding on the utility as a DC fast charger would be? Also, they are less expensive. If you have routes that can work through that. There's some great charging options there that most areas, not all, but most areas have an opportunity to utilize. When you get into the bigger chargers, what they call DC fast, where it's 60 kW or more, you might run into more utility limitations. But I think you work with utility, find out what is available in your area, what will work for your fleet, and how you can work that into your route and make sure that that charger can do the work it needs to provide that bus to make the route on a given day and make it back home to base every night. That's the key.
Mm-hmm. Early, often engagement. I like it. I think that's spot on.
One other thing on the utilities is, Maine's a little funny, we know, but we've been surprised after working with some of the utilities just what's available where. There's places on the coast that 50 years ago had shipbuilding. It's gone now, but the power is still the same. There's great free phase on site. There's places that have sawmills and happen to be 50 miles out off Route 1 or something like that. But until you ask, you're never going to know, and you really might be surprised.
Yeah, I've seen that in certain suburban areas with malls, if you can believe it. Malls that are no longer utilizing the full needs of the power that was originally going to that space potentially being used, and there's certainly opportunities there. John, how has your experience with the utility been? Any sort of key takeaways there?
I haven't really dealt with the utilities a whole lot. I mean, I was here when when they did their first site visit, when they were planning out where the where the chargers were gonna go. But at that time, I wasn't really involved too much in it. So other than talking with them, here and there, since things have been installed, I didn't really have a whole lot of dealings with that. Highland took care of a lot of that, a lot of the discussions. We have the V2G chargers here, so we have the capability of putting power back into the grid, and that was something that Highland worked with through Green Mountain Power. Great.
I guess I have another question for you, Brian, and this sort of relates. It's another audience question. Relates to some of the things I think we hear in rumblings. Do electric buses have a waiting list for purchase, or are they easily available? I think I may know the answer to this one, but interested in your thoughts on it.
That's a really timely question in the school bus industry, but honestly, everything's got a huge waiting list right now. The supply chain hasn't come back like it has for retail auto. It's something we talk about every hour up here, both for new vehicles and for service parts. But we have a parts issue throughout our entire industry, all the OEMs, and we also have some things on the table like long lead times that impact pricing too. So at the current time, I can get an electric school bus quicker than I can get a diesel, which is kind of a strange idea, but a lot of it depends on the OEM and the dealer and how much they stock. So the lead times are crazy, but if you're stocking, it doesn't have to be the bus you order, it has to be the bus you need. So inventory is a way to manage that, and it's realistically, the supply chain's a disaster for everything in the world right now. So I don't think electric's worse than anything else at this point.
Perhaps that goes back to sort of our previous conversations on the planning piece too, right? Understanding the lead times that are existing today and just planning for it, so that you have, as you say, the right bus delivered when you need it. But that certainly takes some planning. Sean and John, I've got a question for you. Would love to start with you, Sean. Our school buses have to navigate their routes sometimes in very challenging climates. How does the electric bus work in colder temperatures? Any thoughts on that?
We haven't had any issues at all with weather. They seem to perform just as well as a diesel bus does. We haven't had any issues. One benefit I would say to it is that there's definitely with the electric bus there's more available heat on the for the bus itself. That's one advantage that I know personally. Also being a driver, I've enjoyed because the diesel buses tend to take on some cold days a couple hours to to heat up. But as far as performance, I would say they're I'd put them next to a diesel bus as far as that's concerned.
Great. John, anything to add to that?
I think the biggest challenge is you're using electric to supply the heat, and they go through some type of grid heater or ceramic heater. And at least in the work that we've done, it can have a significant impact on the range depending on how much that heater is used. Up to maybe even 30% of the range of the bus on a given day, depending on how much the heater is used. And that goes back to that training piece. Do you need to heat the entire envelope when you're going back to the yard when all the students have been dropped off? Can we get heated driver seats to make the driver more comfortable, utilize those type of options? How do we get the driver to use their panel heat instead of heating the whole bus when they're just sitting there not doing anything? Just educating, it's a little different, right? It's different than having an internal combustion engine that really is a heat source that has waste heat. That's what we're using to heat the piece of equipment with, where we're using the electricity to do that. So just be cognizant of that and utilize the bus the best we can and train the drivers to utilize the heating systems best we can. And then we can ensure that we can get the route done and get those students to their destination and get the driver back home.
Yep. And in a comfortable way, which I think is always the goal. Planning. You were
as far as battery usage, and that would probably would be another question that would come up. We've at least last winter we saw as high as we're in the 40 to 45 percentile that we were losing with using heat, defrosters, everything. So not significant, but enough to, like you said, to be aware of. And like I said, that comes down to, like John said, planning and ask the questions from the people that are doing it. And it's definitely going to be different. Any state, well, not even too much farther south than we are, that's not as as cold in the winter. You're definitely going to get a more, you're gonna get more usage out of your charge. You're not gonna use as much. And in the summer, I can tell you too that there is air conditioning. It's more for the driver. It doesn't air condition the entire bus, and that does not really affect the charge all that much.
Very, very helpful, real world perspectives, I think, especially when we're thinking about, as cold of climates as we get pretty much in the US here. So very helpful to know that at least, Sean, you're through planning and through effective implementation, you're able to make it work even in some of the coldest climates.
Right.
I think that's got to be helpful for many folks to hear. I've got a question here and would love for anyone to take it. Can you address maintenance pros and cons of electric buses and provide some specific examples? I don't know who would like to take that first. I think you all have probably a little bit of experience in that realm.
Yeah, I can grab that one if you want. The biggest thing that we tell people is 3/4 of the bus is identical. So you're still greasing, you're still doing brakes, you're still doing tires, you're still doing A and B services at regular intervals. And yeah, your electric powertrain is going to be different, obviously, than your diesel or other powertrain. You're not going to have the oils and filters and things like that. You certainly don't have fuel filters to deal with. There are oddball things that you're not used to. So you're going to have to look at the desiccant for the battery. That's an annual thing. The air compressor oil. There's little maintenance items on a high voltage powertrain, but I would say all in all, it's definitely less. Your tooling, your training, your parts will be slightly different, but realistically, that's the same. Regardless if you buy a different type of bus or a different fuel source. So all in all, it's simpler. When the high voltage is turned off, it's remarkably simple. Compared to a normal engine now that's got after treatment, or millions of moving parts. But yeah, it is different. You've got PPE, you've got training, you've got slightly different tooling, and that's something that techs absolutely have to be aware of.
Sean, John, anything to add to that?
I think Brian said it very well personally. I think also the jury is a little still out, right? Sean was mentioning that technology is still fairly new, so I think we're still learning about what that maintenance looks like. And also maintenance is always subjective. Once we learn a new technology, that maintenance seems to get better over time because the technicians understand how to work on it. They become more effective when working on that piece of equipment. So I think it's just, once again, that educational process and learning and understanding that it's a different technology.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree with John, because there are some things. I mean, it's like anything else. You have that, it's a lot of the components are computerized, and if you don't, it comes down to training. If you don't follow up the process the way it's supposed to be followed, then you almost you can cause your own problems.
Yep.
So really the training piece is definitely very important.
And that's, I think we've addressed it in a couple of our different discussions today, but it's not just training of how to effectively drive these buses, right? But it's training around heating, it's training around AC, it's training around understanding charge management, understanding all of the pieces of this puzzle, right? That lead to the most effective use of the bus. Certainly something that is critical for anyone starting to think through the electrification process. I've seen a couple of questions here about average range between charge of vehicles in your fleet. I know, John, you sort of touched upon this earlier with sort of evaluating your routes and understanding, maybe what's the lowest hanging fruit for electrification. But I'm wondering if you or potentially Sean too, or Brian, honestly, any of you could answer this question, I think. But what's the average mileage that you're seeing with the vehicles that you've electrified and would recommend for districts that are looking to begin the electrification process?
I'm going to defer to Sean on that one. You got them going in your fleet.
So middle of winter, when it's its coldest, you're looking at close to probably whatever your mileage is. That's where I was saying the 45%. So even if you said take your mileage on, say, a morning route, like we have a lot of routes that are 25 to 30 miles. So you almost want to double that, and that's close to what you're going to lose for percentage of charge. So like I said, if you got a route that's 25 miles, you're probably going to use in the area of 50% charge for that route. And there's a lot of different factors depending on, like your like John was saying, depending on how much actual heat you run in the bus, how your driving style, interstate driving is takes more of a toll than stop and go driving in say in a neighborhood. So there's a lot of factors involved.
Climate and terrain certainly too, right? Are you on some hills? Are you in really cold climate? All of these things play a role and should be factored in certainly in the planning process.
Hey, Jane, going back to one thing that Sean said, so we run what they call data loggers. We put them on, we understand and look at what the routes look like, and different drivers as well. And we've seen that just in drivers alone and how training can make a difference. You can have a 10% difference in range just between one driver to the next on the exact same route. So just as Sean said, as a jackrabbit starts, how do they understand? How do they utilize the regenerative braking that's on the bus? There's a lot of factors that go into it that can really help maximize the energy efficiency of that vehicle on a daily basis.
Very helpful. We've got a question here about leasing versus buying. There's a person here who's just starting out on their electrification process. Do you all have thoughts on sort of pros and cons of leasing versus buying? I also see batteries being thrown into that equation as well. Potentially leasing a battery, for example, as being a potential option. Any perspectives on that from you all?
We currently lease a lot of buses. Any day of the week, we can quote a 3-year, a 5-year diesel lease. I can do that in my sleep. And electric is still in that infant phase right now, where we don't know what a 3-year-old bus is going to be worth anything. We don't know if a 5-year-old will be, and that gets back to that concept of risk, right? You've got infrastructure investment on the front end, and I currently don't have a great lease model for that. Some of the lease calculations are specific on grant funding too, and that term gets into things. So it depends whether it's a municipal lease or a contractor lease, and there's still a lot of work to do on that side of it. And as a dealer, I'm not entirely sure how to do that. And that's where the Highland model for us has worked okay in a couple situations, because maybe they're a lot smarter than me. Maybe they're just more comfortable with risk than me, but they've been willing to bite some of that off and to put something, in a format where it's cost beneficial.
Sean, any perspectives on that one?
Yeah, I would agree with Brian.
Yeah. And John, I'll give you final thought on that.
I think it's the district model and how it works best. Some contracting works better, some leasing works better, some outright ownership. But there are some utilities around the country that are leasing batteries to try to they take the battery ownership away from the school district to help them. Once again, I think this is in that let's get some vehicles on the road, understand the phase. They are through their public utilities commissions. They've been able to go to their rates to get these allowances to be able to lease batteries. So it takes some of that fear away from a school district that if in 5 years or 10 years or 12 years, if they need to replace the battery, that's part of a lease program and they don't have to worry about that. So there's different programs. I say, once again, that utility piece, we talked about that. It's not only for the charging infrastructure, but see what programs they have available to really kind of jumpstart a program like this.
Absolutely. And certainly key to those utility programs, right? We've talked a little bit about state, federal incentive funding. Would always encourage every district to look at the state, local, federal level for any available incentives, but that also includes utilities, right? Public utility commissions across the country these days are approving pretty significant incentive programs. They're also approving, as John, you're mentioning, some planning, programming, things that can help districts start this process. And certainly they're a key piece to the puzzle, because you can't have an electric bus if it's not an energized depot. We know that for a fact.
Hey, I would be remiss if I didn't say there's 75 different coalition directors and Clean Cities coalitions around the country that are working on these issues on a daily basis that can really provide resources to these school districts if they have any questions. So they are there. They are more than willing to work with you and help you through this challenge.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking at the time, and I just want to thank you all so much for this great discussion, and thank the audience for all of these wonderful questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but really appreciate the thoughtful discussion that we've had here today. I did want to pose a final question to you all, and this is one that I think hopefully will get you all excited. And that's really sort of a rapid fire, one thing that makes you most excited about sort of the stage of electric school bus that we're in today. And perhaps one thing that maybe keeps you up at night. Brian, I'll start with you.
Yeah, the charging and the infrastructure is definitely not in my wheelhouse. We're still learning the how to do that. We're learning every day, but that's absolutely what keeps me up at night. But it's fun to try something new, right? I mean, the vehicles today are way more complicated than they were 5 years ago. They're way more complicated than they were 30 years ago. And that's, regardless of powertrain choice, that's not going to change anytime soon. So on a service and a technical side, it's fun to work on stuff. It's fun to figure stuff out. And it's fun to be part of things that make our industry safer and more efficient.
Couldn't agree more. Sean, you want to respond next?
I would say that it's been challenging, but it's also been exciting. It's something new. It's like Brian said, it's fun to get into something, to get in something new and make it work. And as far as I think I would have to agree with the electric side of it, the charging part of it, and we have discharge events where the power company pulls power from the buses back into the grid. Is wondering, are the buses going to be charged up in the morning, ready to go? They have been so far, but that's that's because that whole process is also in its infancy, and it's just challenging negotiating all that. But like I said, so far it's been going great. It's been fun.
Wonderful. John, want to round us out?
I think we're in an exciting time. When I was at the school district, we bought a hybrid bus. We know that technology didn't make it, but it was exciting to try that and get that into the fleet. I think it's great for fleets to get into an electric vehicle and try it, see how it works to their fleet. Do I believe internal combustion engines are going to be around for quite a while? Me personally, I do believe that. But do I believe there is a place for electric vehicles? Without a doubt. And I think there's a lot of great applications. And that's why these incentives are there, to try to help mitigate some of those financial challenges that Brian talked about. I think the fear for me is ensuring the bus makes it back at the end of every day. I think Sean said that very well. As a fleet manager, I had three things: bus make pullout, bus make the stop safely for the kids, and bring that bus back to the yard safely every night. And if it did that, that tool did its job. And if it can't, then I'm not going to buy it again. So to me, it's always important to make sure that we're putting the right tool in the right application, put the right school bus on the right routes, make sure the driver is comfortable, make sure it comes back home every night. And if you do that, you're going to have a successful program, and you're going to work through those different issues, like Sean said, that come up with any vehicle.
Well, that was incredibly well said, all of you. I couldn't agree more across the board. I think as I reflect on our discussion today, three big things come to mind, and I'll give a tip of the hat to Duncan for calling this a playbook, but identifying your playbook for engagement with your district, thinking through routes, planning, making sure that you're bringing in the right stakeholders at the right times. Often that means as early as you possibly can. Training, making sure that everybody throughout the entire list of your stakeholders is being effectively trained and educated on this process. And then certainly learning from others, I think, is the other sort of key takeaway I have from this discussion today. Learning from peers like Sean here, learning from great resources like Brian and John, who have certainly experienced electrics in real time and are actively learning from them. And then, as John mentioned, taking advantage of all of the different entities that are out there, looking to help. Clean Cities coalitions were mentioned today. Certainly, NREL does tons of resources. Folks like Highland are here to help as well. So really appreciate the robust discussion we've had today. Duncan, in the last minute, I'll turn it to you and see if you've got anything else to add. But from my side of things, I just want to thank you all and thank the audience for participating today.
Thanks, Jane. Yeah, and thanks to the panel. That was great. I think my only observation would be I'm encouraged and excited to see a debate like this with power users. The three of you have experiences that I think a lot of people want to draw on. And it's clear to me in the chat that there's a lot of really good questions and people are coming at it from their own unique angles. I know we only got to a fraction of them and I was on mute rapidly trying to pound out answers to the ones I could. So for those that we didn't get to, feel free to hit us up afterwards and we'll try to get to additional questions. But, this concept of power users didn't exist even 3 years ago. These are people like Sean, Brian, and John who've had, an amount of experience that really makes their experience valuable in being able to have a knowledge base to allow others to sort of short circuit some of the mistakes that were made early in the market and have more positive experiences. Making sure they do what John said, which is they go out, they do safe routes, and they come back. That's reliability. This whole industry needs to sort of lean into shared knowledge to make sure reliability is at the core of what we do. So with that, I just want to, again, thank everyone. Enjoyed the session today. And again, please feel free to stay in touch and happy Halloween.
Yes, happy Halloween. Bye all. Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.